All right, hello, new students. This is Cam Addis again, your history instructor from Austin Community College. I want to talk to you briefly today about my teaching philosophy. I don't have time to get into everything, but I want to talk about things especially that connect to the course. You can look at some more formal explanations up here under the Texas Core Curriculum, which you can find under Guides in History Hub, and that will explain how the course is mapped to some of the core objectives from the Higher Education Board. But most of you will probably be looking just over here at the homepage. And the homepage, it talks a little bit about the importance of perspective, recognition, context. One of our former presidents, Harry Truman, once said that there's absolutely nothing new in the world except for what you don't know about history. Well, I don't know if that's quite true, but I think there's enough truth to that it's something we ought to pay attention to. You're going to be learning about a lot of things in the course that you're never going to see repeated again exactly the way they happened in your future, but you're going to see patterns there. And recognizing those patterns, I think, will help you understand what's going on around you a little bit better. I always tell people, if you really want to understand things, you want to look at the context. You want to go both back and out to get perspective. When I say back and out, when I say back, I mean back in history and see how people have dealt with challenges like that in the past, but also out in terms of a wider area or geographically, or looking globally at how other cultures have dealt with similar challenges as well. So there are many different things I talk about here on the front of the History Hub homepage, but one of them is that trying to figure out what's going on around you just based on what you see in the present. It's very similar to me to if you only saw one scene in a movie and then somebody asked you, what's the plot of this movie? And you had no idea not only what's going to happen in the future, none of us do, but also no background at all as to what's happened earlier in the movie. Be very difficult to arrive at an intelligent opinion as to what this movie is about. For instance, if all you saw from rear window was this still, or even a little bit more, and you saw Jimmy Stewart there, you wouldn't know why he's in his pajamas, or definitely not what he's looking at through this camera. Is he just taking pictures of a nice scene outside? Is he using the telephoto lens to spy on his neighbors? What exactly is he doing? If he's doing that, why is he doing that? You really would be pretty clueless. Same thing with this still from the Alamo 2004. You see, well, I can tell that Dennis Quaid was in this movie and he's playing Sam Houston. But even if you saw the entire scene, what would you really know about the roots of the Texas Revolution, let alone the impact later? There's no context at all to explain anything. So we're going to try to look, we can't see the future in this class, but we're going to do our best to figure out the ways that the past can help us explain the present. So this happens to be me, by the way, as an extra in the Alamo. And one of the longer working days, I have to say, I arrived there at 3 a.m. Great breakfast, by the way. But between 4 a.m. and noon, we all got into costume. And then from noon until midnight, we shot this scene that lasted a total of about 3 minutes. So anyway, fun work. If you're looking for a little extra money and living in Austin, they make a lot of movies, a lot of commercials, things like that. So you might want to consider being an extra. On a slightly more serious note, I want to look at some educational philosophy that helps inform what I do. This is Bloom's pyramid. If you've ever heard of anything connecting to pedagogy, it's probably Bloom's pyramid or Bloom's taxonomy. There's a lot of talk about using sort of factual knowledge and building on that for higher orders of thinking. I do agree with Bloom's pyramid in terms of that basic concept, even though I would quibble with the specific details and how these are ranked. I wouldn't put necessarily evaluation or analysis or application or creation in any particular order or anything like that. I think things like that in general, critical thinking, would belong a little bit more at the top of the pyramid. But you could say that this, applies roughly to what we're doing in this class with the textbook chapters, and the 5 objective exams that we're taking on those apply a little bit more here to the purple area, especially, even though the learning objectives are going to use behavioral terms or action verbs at the beginning. And rather than just asking you a question, they're going to say, evaluate this, analyze this, etc. We don't deal a lot with the very bottom rung here, the remembering. Some of that's built into the course because you have to remember what you've learned about higher orders of thinking. But I will never ask you on an exam, for instance, what year did something happen, or something that's just purely rote memorization about a fact like that. We're going to be interpreting and understanding facts, and then, testing our knowledge of that. And then we have the written components of the course are really hanging out here more in the higher levels of thinking. We got the interpretive essay with the online or the ONL format, where you're going to be comparing and contrasting on a topic of your choice, how another scholar has dealt with a topic in comparison with our textbook, and how well this other outside author deals with the evidence and comes to a different interpretation. Perhaps they are looking at it from a fresh angle because they're a different person, or maybe they have fresh material. Maybe there have been declassified documents, but we're constantly reinterpreting history. It's an ongoing argument. You may have heard the word revisionism used in kind of a negative way, like somebody is accused of being a revisionist. We're constantly revising. Whatever it is you think about history, that's probably a revised interpretation based on what someone else said before that. The argumentative essay for the face-to-face courses, or for the lecture courses, we're going to go into a little bit more detail there in the classroom, but suffice to say that also involves a lot of analysis and evaluation. And then everyone in all the formats is going to be doing some form of social media analysis. This is, for better or worse, really how most Americans are learning about and interpreting history now, is through social media, which, as you can imagine, can be a little bit misleading, or even at the very best, very fragmentary, in terms of you're just getting little snippets and bits of history from posts and memes, and the person's trying to make some point about it. And so we're going to really kind of analyze some examples of that, unpack them, deconstruct them a little bit, figure out what point this person's trying to make, and then look a little bit deeper at that topic and ask ourselves how that could potentially be an oversimplification. So really, all of you are going to be working on that assignment. And the idea of that is to really strengthen your digital literacy. Now, digital literacy is a term that sometimes people will use to just describe, can the person use a computer or not, which is an important skill. But here we're defining it a little bit more broadly to mean, how well are you filtering information? How well are you evaluating what you're seeing and taking stock in it? So I'm going to be encouraging some methods that I've developed, which are imperfect, but ones that you can use purely online when you're on your own, in terms of lateral cross-checking and things like that. Looking at what other sources have to say about the topic, or what other sources have to say about that source, but also guiding you through how to use the ACC library, because they have great access to JSTOR and EBSCO, and more scholarship at your fingertips than ever before, even though there's also more unreliable information that's out there than ever before. So really what I'm trying to do is encourage you to do your own research in an intelligent way. I realize that phrase DYOR is fraught with associations. You may have seen people, wearing t-shirts or baseball hats that say do your own research on it, who are the ones going down the most crackpot rabbit holes. And so, it depends on who the you is with the do your own research, and how well that person has developed those skills of evaluation and filtering. Because really, our society, if you have not noticed, is in a real state of confusion right now, where not only do we disagree on things, but we really don't even have an agreed upon sense of reality anymore because of how the internet has impacted us, and because of the fragmentation of media, et cetera. So it's a very important skill, I think, as we look to strengthen and embolden our republic, is to get a little bit better at that. Because these people over here, they need to learn how to analyze, how to evaluate. So we're going to be doing some exercises along those lines. Another thing that Bloom's pyramid, I think, connects to decently is the study of history. The fancier word of which is historiography, but historiography, like learning in general, is kind of based on a foundation. And there is a bedrock of factual knowledge that's out there that's more or less agreed upon. We disagree a little bit on that also, but that's at least theoretically possible for us to agree on the facts. And the way we look at these facts in history, when we talk about evidence in history, we use the word primary sources. But whenever you hear me use the word primary sources, I don't mean what's your main source. I mean, what is the evidence? And when I say evidence, I mean something that was manufactured in the time period under discussion. So we have these facts as a bedrock, but then we also interpret history. And once we go into interpreting history, then there is without fail going to be a certain amount of bias and subjectivity there. Now, this is another important thing for you to distinguish between, is the concept of bias, which is not a bad thing as long as you know what you're reading, and fake news or misinformation. There's misinformation, which is wrong, and then there's disinformation, which is deliberately wrong. But both of those are very different than, for instance, bias. You can have a left-leaning magazine like The Nation, for instance, is biased, or a right-leaning magazine like National Review is biased, but there's nothing fake about them. Bias, in fact, is really how, or interpretation is really how you move toward creating a thesis when you write a paper. So once you get up into this territory, no two historians are alike. One of the things I pointed out when I was showing you the Rear to Fogger over in the History Hub was a bunch of different fallacies. One of those is selection bias. Selection bias is not really a fallacy. It's just a bias that's inescapable, because no matter what material we present, we have to decide which material to present. So for instance, if I was going to tell you everything that ever happened in American history, well, no one person could even remotely begin to do that. But even if I could do that, the textbook would be 5 million pages long. So if I'm going to pare that down and shrink that down to a certain number of chapters, what material am I going to teach you? Well, that subjection, that subjective bias, that selection bias, that alone, that's going to vary from person to person. And there are people that would teach more of an old-fashioned, political military history, kind of great events, sort of dead white males, mountaintop to mountaintop. You might see in a more modern textbook only race, class, and gender, only history from the bottom up. So I'm going to give you actually kind of a variety there. This is a survey class, and I'm going to give you wide varieties of history there. It'll kind of help you think about things in different ways.